Humanity, I love you all with all my heart, with all my might. I'm so Ray. My videos are about love, infinity, creation, because we're infinite love, infinite energy, infinite creation. This is exactly who we are. And today's video is a beautiful video. It's a video about exercise number 4, or exercise 4. So you can always, this is a very practical exercise. This is extremely useful. It is extremely useful. So I'm gonna deep dive into it, okay? So I'm gonna first read it, maybe 2 or 3 times, a few times, and then I'm gonna go line by line and explain what I mean by exercise 4. Okay, so let's do it. So exercise 4, facing fears premise. 1 to 10 scale logic. Does it scare you at all? How scary is it? Why is it so scary? Follow your heart. Signs and signals. Go for gold and diamonds. All in, do it. Here and now, infinite love. Okay, infinity equals 0. Okay, so I'm going to read it one more time. Exercise 4, facing fears, premise. 1 to 10 scale logic. Does it scare you at all? How scary is it? Why is it so scary? Follow your heart, signs and signals, go for gold and diamonds. All in, do it, here and now, infinite love, infinity equals 0. Okay, so let's go line by line. So, facing fears premise. So this is the premise of exercise 4. Is facing our fears. Facing our fears is such an important thing because it's what leads us. So what's on the other side? Think about it from this point of view. What's on the other side of fear? Once you deal with your fear, once you face your fears, so what is on the other side? Once there is no more fear, that you deal with the fear, you face the fear, so you become fearless. So you fearlessly engaging in the actions of facing your fears every day, every moment, here and now, right? Forever, infinitely, because this is our nature. This is who we are as a species. We face our fears and we conquer them all. We conquer our fears. All our fears are here to be conquered. Okay, it's as simple as that. Because fear is low energy. It's low vibration. Okay, it's very low vibration. It's destructive in nature. So and how does that look in our space structure, density, in our reality? Because remember, the human heart is a biological creator. The heartbeat is the pulse of life, is the pulse of creation. It generates the electromagnetic field that surrounds the human body, and the space structure of that electromagnetic field is us, the body. So we can have senses, we can have, we're conscious, we're self-aware, we're intelligent as a result of that, we're sentient, we have emotions. Why? Because emotions come from the human heart. And the highest energy that the human heart generates is love. It's the highest energy. It's the opposite of fear. Fear is the lowest energy. It's the lowest energy in the heart. That's why, biologically speaking, when you're in fear, you get paralyzed. You are inactive. You take no action. Why? Because it's low energy. It's destructive in nature. Okay? It's parasitic in nature. Okay? It's the opposite of love. Duality principles, right? Think about it. Telemetric thinking, proto-meta systems properties analysis, right? The duality principles of fear and love. Fear is the lowest vibration, is the lowest energy. Is when you're afraid, when you're frightened, when you're scared, you have fear. And when that means you're not generating as high energy as you can with your heart. So you're paralyzed, you're dormant, your DNA is dormant. So facing fear's premise is extremely important because it's moving away from the fear. So what's on the other side of fear? Love, the highest energy of creation. Remember who we are. Our race is at the epicenter of the cosmos. We're the planet that orbits the central sun of our universe and all the universes that we have created with our minds and consciousness and self-awareness, because we are this species. We're the infinite eternal creators. We're the human race. We're compass and sundials. This is who we are. We're infinite eternal creators. We're co-creators of infinite eternities. So what is it about this then? So while you deal with them fears, right? You face them, all right? And the way these fears form is in the way of events and experiences, right? Trauma, objects, in the way of the fantasies and illusions, okay? So these are objects in the way of mediums and media, messages and messengers, outside our control and within our control. But in the beginning, they're outside our control because these objects, whatever the nature, they come within our proximity. What proximity? The proximity of our human heart, which is what generates the electromagnetic field of our life as individuals, as humans, as compass, as sundials, as citizens of the Republic of Planet Earth, right? Why? Because they need to be within our proximity to have any effect. Why? Because our proximity is the senses, our sensory perception. Remember, we're sentient. We have senses. We feel, we have emotions, and we're conscious and self-aware, and we're intelligent. So this is our nature. So what is that? So the highest energy of the human heart, right? The highest energy of the human heart is love. Why? Because remember, the epicenter of the sphere is where all the energy comes from, is the singularity. And the biological singularity of our existence is the biological creator, which is the human heart. It's essentially the way our DNA evolved. So it needed a singularity for the DNA to essentially map out the space structure of who we are. Yeah. So that singularity is the human heartbeat, right? It's the pulse of life, the pulse of creation, right? The infinite cycle, the self-reinforcement. And by creating that resonance, then that creates life, and that energy powers the whole body and all the organs and all the glands. So all the other singularities of all the glands and organs can happen as a result of it. That's the way our resonance works as a species. So the highest energy of remember, if you think of our central sun that created all the light, that creates everything in our universe, that created us in the first place, right? If you think about it from that point of view, where does that energy come from? From the brightest, hottest point at the epicenter of the central sun, where all the light comes from, all the photons, all the elements. And then that fills up all the space vacuum structures of this space structure of the sphere, within the sphere, which is our universe, right? And then that creates everything as a result by filling spherical vacuum thresholds within the space structure of the sphere, and that creates other galaxies. And the point of release is that singularity, the epicenter of those spheres. In the case of it is a central sun. The central sun of our universe is us, our sun. The sun of suns, the central sun, the first sun, where all light came out of. And we were created by that, and we were the first species to evolve into the image of the creator, which is light spherical energy. That's why we have a resonance field that is light spherical energy, because we're like light spherical species, because within our species, within our light spherical threshold, right, our light spherical energy is the space structure of who we are, our bodies and everything, our consciousness and self-awareness and everything else. So and what's the highest energy of the human heart? So it's like the central sun creates all the light at the hottest point, right, at the brightest point, the epicenter, the singularity. All the energy gets released, and everything is created as a result. Well, in our case, it's the same. So what's our epicenter? Well, the human heart, because literally it's an electromagnetic field, and at the center of it is a human heart, the epicenter. And the highest energy is love that our heart can create, which is the opposite of the lowest energy, which is fear, which is when our body is paralyzed, we're frightened, scared, all that, right? Low energy. So we're not in control because we're not in control of us. It's the opposite, you see. So the highest energy is love. So when you love with all your heart and all your might, the highest energy is created. So you start to create infinities, because we're infinite in nature. Because the sphere is infinite and we're spherical energy. So that means that we're infinite ourselves. Okay, this is who we are as a species. We're an incredible species. So love is the highest energy of creation. And that energy originates at the epicenter of the singularity, which is a human heart, the biological scale. So love is the highest energy. So the more you love, the more you create. So this is what the facing fears premise is. So it's facing our fears. And fears happen as a result of objects interacting within our electromagnetic field that come in proximity of our human heart, right? They come within our, because the human heart generates the electromagnetic field, right? So the space structure of it is the human body. So we're alive, we're conscious, self-aware, right? We're sentient, we're intelligent, we feel, we have emotions, we have sensory perception, we see everything with our senses, hear, touch, smell, everything, right? So objects come within the proximity so we can see them. And the way those objects operate is in the way of events and experiences within our life, in our conscious self-awareness. So these objects are what we call fantasies and illusions. Okay, these are fantasies and illusions because they're not real. Why are they not real? Because they're mediums and media. The messages and messengers within our control and outside our control. Why are these not real? Because it's destruction. It's the opposite of love, which is creation. We are creation. It's the highest energy of creation. This is who we are. We're a benevolent species. Our instinct is to love. Because love is what allows us to create and be one with everything, which is what we are. We're in sync with the electromagnetic field of our heart when we love, which allows us to be in sync with everything because we ourselves are a singularity that is connected to all the singularities in existence, including the central sun that created us and our planet Earth, everything that we anyway manufacture planet Earth. So I might talk about it today. So, but I'm just talking about this exercise because it's fundamental. So these objects show up, right? And when this event is negative in nature, they're destructive in nature. So they show up, they're parasites, right? They show up. Why? Because they want the light. Insects want the light. Think about it from that point of view. You have light, it's dark at night, but there is a light, it's a fire. You see all these insects going to cease to exist because they want to meet the light. It's their instinct, the light seeking. That's their instinct. So think of these objects as insects. Okay? So they show up as parasites. Why? Because they want the energy source of our heart. That's what they want. Because our heart is infinite energy, infinite creation. Right? We create infinite energy, infinite creation. So if they get within the proximity of it, what are they doing? They're sucking up all that energy like a parasite. Right? Because their fear is the opposite. They're destructive in nature. Why? Because what they want is for the resonance of the heart not to love. Because if it doesn't love, then it's easier for them to interact with it because the energy is lower. So it lowers the vibration as it sucks up all the energy as a parasite. And these are the events, right? And these events are events and experiences in our lives, right? So say, for example, an event and an experience happens, right? That is a fantasy and illusion, right? Which is not real because it's the opposite of creation. It's destructive in nature. It's a trauma. And we know what those are. Hatred, fear, pain, suffering, all this negativity packed up in the way of an object that interacts within our resonance field. Gets as close as it can. As close as it can, because it's the nature of these fantasies and illusions. And what happens after the event finishes, right? After the event finishes, what happens? After the event finishes, right? The experience. So the object disappears. It leaves the perimeter. It leaves the periphery. It's not within our memory, and it's not within our what we can see anymore. It left our electromagnetic field of creation. It's not within our space anymore. It's out of it. But it created an impression, and that impression is a memory because we're conscious and self-aware, and then that memory is within our control, right? The event, the experience, the object that showed up is outside our control. But once that object is removed, the event, the experience, right, it leaves, it ceases to exist in that moment. It disappears. What's the next step? Well, the memory remains, and now that's within our control because it's our memory. So what trauma is reliving those negativities, right? You're reliving the negative experience that came sucking up our energy, lowering our vibration by design, because these are manufactured by design. These are mediums and media, right? Parasitic in nature. Messages and messengers in the way of objects, which are events and experiences that show up, whether they're conscious or unconscious of it, unaware or aware, because remember, duality principles. Those objects show up and they interact within our proximity, our heart, and then they create this impression, this negativity, and that becomes a memory. So essentially, in our life, and that's what forms the fantasy, the illusion, because the illusion is that it's not real because the event ended. It's just a memory. You see, it's an illusion. It's just a memory. It's an impression. It's not real anymore because the event finished. But when it's traumatic, right? Because it's painful, it's suffering, it's fear, it's all sorts, right? Hatred, all sorts, negativity, it's low vibration, it's destructive in nature. You see, it's very low in nature, extremely low. It's the lowest, it's the opposite of love. It's destructive in nature, it's the opposite. In nature is the opposite, it's destructive, right? It's destructive in nature. So what it means is that, this illusion is in your mind now. Why? Because it's a memory. Why? Because we're sentient. So all these events that take place as a memory, we attach emotions to it and feelings because we're sentient, it's our nature, right? So what happens is that because of the nature of the event, it creates an impression in our mind, and that impression is a way of a cognitive load. And if it's a negative cognitive load, when we think of that memory or anything that triggers that memory, then it's a negative memory, it's a negative event, right? So what does that do? Well, it's negative, right? What does it do? Our body reacts to it, and if you're not in control of it, that creates fantasies. That illusion renders fantasies because out of that memory you start to associate things that are triggered as a result of that memory negatively, because that becomes like the epicenter. It becomes the singularity. That illusion becomes a singularity of its own, that cognitive load. And it triggers all sorts of events in our lives that are attached to low vibrations, because remember, those are energy, right? This cognitive load in it. So then our minds, when we say an event, another object comes into our proximity and it triggers us. Why? Because of the previous event and negativity. So we start to associate all these memories, all these things within our control to that, and then that illusion renders fantasies. So it's a vicious cycle of self-destruction, because essentially we start to associate, think about it, we start to associate our own time here and now with that illusion, which is an event that is a memory that is not real in the first place, a fantasy, an illusion, right? It ended, it's just a memory. And then our mind, because in nature is to think, starts to fantasize over those events, and our memories start to become negative, right? And then it creates fantasies, and then we start to create delusional thinking because of this fantasy and all the emotions attached to it. And then that starts to create all sorts of biological effects, and we see in the way of our attitude. And then, because of the low energy, because remember, these things are sucking up our energy, are parasitic in nature. That's the whole purpose of them. They're designed for that very purpose. So why? Because they want by design to lower the energy of our heart, because it's the energy of infinity of creation. Because they're parasites, they want to feed off the energy of the heart. Okay? So the only way for them to get it in the proximity is by lowering the vibration of the body so they can be closer to the source, which is the heart. Okay? the creator. So by creating fear-based situations, then the memories and the fantasies start to create this vicious cycle in the mind of the individual, and then the individual gets paralyzed, and then it's not creating anymore, it's not loving anymore, which is our nature, is the reason you see it's very destructive in nature. So, and all these memories, right, are stored in our unconscious mind. They're stored in our unconscious mind, and we call that the shadow. It's all the friction, all the background noise, okay? All this low vibration, all this static, because it's not real energy, it's artificial energy, it's an artifice, it's a fantasy, it's an illusion that's being created by an event and an experience, okay? And then that's there, and in the beginning it's outside our control because it comes within our proximity as an object, messages, messengers, mediums, and media. Of any way, there's an infinite number of mediums, an infinite number of media, an infinite number of messages and messengers. It's just the way existence is, because we're conscious and self-aware, and everything that comes within our proximity has a cognitive load based on their nature. And the objects that I'm referring to are fantasies and illusions. These are negative, destructive in nature, the opposite of love. Okay, the opposite, because they're parasitic in nature. They want to feed off the energy of humans, okay, by design. So essentially it's their nature, it's their instincts. So essentially what happens is that you got to deal with it, right? You got to deal with it because you're alive. We're the human heart. We're the human species. We're infinite eternal creators. We are the energy of creation. The reason why these objects in the first place, in the way of messages and messengers, mediums and media, fantasies and illusions, come within our proximity is because they want to be near us. Because we're infinite energy, infinite creation, because our human heart. We created the universes because this is the race that we are. So these are parasitic in nature. They cannot create themselves. They can only, they're parasites. You see, a parasite is only, doesn't create, it just consumes. The nature of a parasite. So these are these. So they want our energy of creation. And the only, because it's such a high, the love is such a high energy of because it's the energy that created everything. You see, we have evolved into infinite eternal creators with the energy of the human heart because we are the epicenter of the universe. So we've evolved into a species that consumes the energy of the central sun through our eyes, right? We stare at the sun, all that energy comes inside and supercharges us, so it allows us to love more, which is the epicenter of our own creation, right? And then we breathe oxygen, we drink water, which is oxygen and hydrogen, and these elements come from the central sun in origin because of the density of it creates everything as a result. And the food that we eat, minerals, right? All these nutrients, it nourishes us. It has elements in them, right? So you see, we're consuming, the central sun is our food source. So we're high energy. When we love, which is the highest energy of our epicenter, of a human heart, then we create infinities with it. We create universes as a result because of our nature, is in our DNA structure, is who we are. I have spoken about our origin story many times. So essentially, these objects don't have the same ability because an insect is not the same as a human, right? Think about it from that point of view. You know, seeks light, right? Why? Because it's attracted to it by nature. So think of these objects in the same way. It's a good analogy to think of them as insects of all these fantasies and all these illusions. Why? Because the human heart is this infinite energy. So it's attracted to the light, the object, right? But because of the density, it's parasitic in nature. If it gets too close, it's going to be the same as an insect that gets to the fire and it gets burned. And it ceases to exist, right? So they can't get too close, these events, these experiences. Why? Because they will cease to exist as a result. Why? Because of the energy density, the space structure density. Because they're negative in nature. They're cognitive loads that are negative in nature. The opposite of love, which is what we are. So it becomes that polarity. So they can only come as close as they can. Why? Because what happens when negativity and positivity comes in, it creates a polarity. And that polarity creates a force field and then it becomes neutralized. So that there's so much they can go as close as they can. And the only way they can go any closer is by lowering the energy, so they can, and that's why they're parasitic in nature, because the negativity starts to consume the positivity, the opposite charge. And they start to do that, and they just get as close as they can. And all these memories and all these events in our lives that make us negativity, it's negative in nature, right? Paralyzes us and all sorts, right? So these are parasitic insectoids, right? These objects, they show up. They just want to interact as much as they can because they're consuming our energy. Just like we consume the energy of the sun to create infinities, these objects consume our energy to survive, essentially, right? And our energy is that love, is infinity. So, and those are outside our control, right? Showing up. And they start to create memories and impressions. And those memories lead to fantasies because we start to fantasize over those memories because our nature is to think. So if we're not conscious of who we are, our nature as infinite eternal creators, the heart, and who we are, the most powerful creators, because our human heart is infinity itself. Our biology is infinity itself. We have become central suns ourselves, right? That's why we have all this stuff wanting to have our energy, because of who we are, our nature. So essentially, when they show up, we create these memories, right? But then that's outside of control. But then the memories are within our control, right? Because that's as far as they can do. They can only create memories and impressions. All these negativities, all these events, right? So what is it? Why is this exercise for? Facing fear's premise. Because it's exactly that. What's the fear? Well, it's the cognitive load, it's the memory, it's the trauma, it's the event, it's the experience that becomes, it's part of our lives now, because on our conscious mind it creates the shadow. And what's the shadow? The shadow is all the static, all the background noise, all the destructive forces, right? In the shadows, right? Lurking, taking up all this energy, right? Taking up all this energy as much as they can in their parasitic nature, right? And they come in waves, right? Yeah, trying to get a little bit more feeding, right? As much as they can. So essentially, what this means is that we need to increase our heart energy, because by increasing our heart energy, then we repel them, so they can't come within our proximity anymore. And the only way we do that is by dealing with all the impressions and all the negativity. So we integrate the shadow of our mind. So because we're compass, we're identity and true self, we're purpose, we're time and energy, we're action, we're why, how, we're flow, we're true north and destination, right? This is who we are. We're the human heart. We're the most evolved species in the cosmos, right? And we're sundials. We stare at the sun and use that energy to superpower our structures, supercharge them, so we can love more, so we can create more energy. So what does it do? Well, by facing our fears, facing the fear's premise, we can love more, because what our consciousness and self-awareness does, it starts to identify within our control the memories that are the building blocks of the shadow in our unconscious mind. Because the shadow is lifeless. You see, it's a parasite. It's lifeless. But it has defense mechanisms. And the defense mechanisms are the fantasies, all illusions, all these memories, all these impressions that get triggered by defense mechanisms of new objects coming in the proximity, right? So we react to them, and we call shadow projection, right? We're projecting our shadow because of as a reaction of these objects interacting with us, wanting more energy, because of their nature, their low vibration, right? And that's what woe is. Woe is negativity just going at it. Hatred is that two sides. You see duality. It's the polarity of it. And it has a singularity at the epicenter of its destructive nature. So because we're love or infinite, this is our nature, what we do is, facing fear's premises, this is a 1 to 10 scale logic. And why? Because you have to identify from 1 to 10. The first question is, does it scare you at all? And what am I talking about? What is, because fear is being frightened, right? Being scared, being afraid. because it paralyzes you. That's the biological condition of fear. That's how it manifests in our consciousness, in action. So then what we do, we need to love, right? Which is the highest energy of creation. So fear is the opposite, duality, right? Fear, love. Hate, love is the opposite, right? And this is energy based, right? Because we're energy. So essentially, because we're conscious and self-aware, within our control, we can control our thoughts, so we can identify these memories, these events, these triggers, right? These experiences, these fantasies, these illusions, these objects that are the way of memories that are causing a negative impression in our lives, right? Trauma. So what we do is we start to ask this fundamental question: is, does it scare you at all? And what's it? Well, is a fantasy, is event, is the experience, is the illusion, is the object, right? Is the trigger, is the shadow, right? The memory in our lives, the event, because it might happen here and now, live, a new event. How do you react to it? Or it's just a memory that you're healing, because in the beginning it's just a memory, right? So the first thing that you do is to scale it. So does it scare you at all? 1 to 10. Ideally, you gotta follow your heart, because heart is the highest energy of creation, signals and signs, signs and signals of the human heart, right? Our creator, the biological creator. It allows us to be here, and that's why these objects are interacting with us, because they want the energy of our heart. In the first place, they feed of it. It's the food source. It's like the central sun is our food source. Us, as biological organisms, we are the food source of these parasites. Okay, it's the same, but it's just a different scale. Gotta think in terms of scale. So, okay, that's what 1 to 10 scale logic. So, does it scare you at all? Then from 1 to 10, you follow your heart. So you need to choose that event, that memory, right? That is a 10, as close as a 10 as possible. 9, 10. Why? Because those are the most important ones, because those are the root cause. Those are the ones that where the most negative load is. It's like a singularity fantasy and illusion. It is at the epicenter of a collective of fantasies and illusions, and that negativity, right? And that's normally a big trauma in our lives, a big trauma, a big event, a big experience in our lives of any nature that triggers all this negativity, and it paralyzes us and stuff, right? So you see, does it scare you at all? And you know immediately what it is. And if there is a lot of fear in your life, then you would have a lot of things that scare you, because that's just the way it is, because you're on that level of consciousness and awareness. So essentially, what it means is that, right? What it means is that you ask that question to yourself: does it scare you at all? Does it scare me at all? And then whatever comes to you, follow your heart. Your heart will tell you yes, no, and then you rate it, scale it 1 to 10. Is it a 10? Okay, cool. And then the moment that you know what it is, now you're conscious of it. You see, it's within your control now. It could be an event, traumatic event, painful memory, suffering, hatred, all sorts, right? So you identify it immediately. And when you do that, then you say, how scary is it? Then 1 to 10 scale logic. How scary is it? Because you know now that it scares you. 10, it's a 9, it scares me, really. And then how scary is it? Then again, it's another scale. You're scaling it to make sure that you deal with the one that is the actual epicenter, because you want to get to the source, to the root cause, right? To the object that is the source, the epicenter of the problem. Okay? So then how scary is it? 1 to 10, you rate it. Okay, so it's a 10. Well, I'm headed in the right direction, because you're listening to your heart. Right? You're listening to your heart. And then you go into why. Why is it so scary? Which is eventually, once you identify it, you know it's scary, and then you know it's very scary. Then the natural question is why? So you can identify the root cause, the event, and trace it back to the origin source, the object, the original object. The original object that generated that first illusion that rendered all the fantasies as a result, and it became an epicenter. And it's the epicenter of the shadow is where the shadow is hidden. All right, where the shadow is hiding, lurking. Okay? The epicenter. Okay? So then, and that is what? The memory in our unconscious mind, right? The memory in our unconscious mind. Oh, that was the event. I remember that day. That happened that day. Oh, yeah, I remember. This is what happened. And then you start to remember. So you start to gain control. So what does that do? By engaging your consciousness of infinite creation, there is the polarity loses a lot of its initial, the force field gets essentially destroyed. Why? Because by engaging your consciousness, because you're dealing with your fear, right? And how do you deal with your fear? With a higher energy, because it's love. You're following your heart. So the energy of your love starts to take control of it, which is a higher energy. So you start to deal with that memory, with the fantasies, with the illusion, with the object, with the messengers, with the messages, with the mediums and the media, and the way you react, and the triggers, and the shadow, your unconscious mind, everything. Because in the end, it's friction. You see, it's static, it's low vibration, it's destructive in nature, it's background noise. It's not real. It's not alive. The shadow is lifeless. It's just an accumulation of tension, which is the pressure, the stress in our lives. Okay, all these memories, all these events. So when you start to identify it, then what do? Okay, you know exactly what the memory is. You see, you identify the epicenter, the root cause, because you're asking why. And then that why is also scaled from 1 to 10. And this is a natural process. So you start to identify them, all these memories, all the triggers, because now when you're conscious of it, then in your life, you start to see that where the triggers come from, the fear base and all that. Because remember, our mind associates and starts to associate everything from that root cause to all the triggers and all the events around our lives that were essentially kind of like within the periphery of the epicenter of that negativity. That is what essentially is the defense mechanism of the shadow. So, the parasitic nature of this event, feeds upon our energy with fear and all that, right? Which is the opposite. So by loving it, is that because you engage your heart. And once you identify it and then the trigger, what is it that we do? Well, we follow our hearts. Follow your heart. Signs and signals. Go for gold and diamonds. So what is the meaning of going for gold and diamonds? Well, you go all in. And now you engage your whole heart. You see, all in, you do it. Here and now, infinite love. Remember, infinity equals zero. We are infinity because we're zero. What's a zero? Is fear. And we are an electromagnetic field of creation. The human heartbeat is that, the pulse of life, the pulse of creation, the electromagnetic field surrounding the human body that creates energy. Heart is the epicenter, so the highest energy is love. So by loving it with all your heart, then you start to forgive yourselves, accept yourself, love yourself, self-love, right? You love yourself, you love the event, the experience, the memory. And there's catharsis, right? It's a lot of traumatic, so you're going to go through a lot. Because when you are acting out all these events in your life, biological reactions to the trauma is crying, all sorts of releases, tension release, sobbing, uncontrollable movements, all sorts, because your body is essentially healing, is dealing with everything. You're dealing with the pain, with the trauma, with the suffering, with the emotion, with the memory. Whatever the memory is, has been there as the epicenter of the shadow, hiding in the shadows of your unconscious mind, triggering all these events in your life and taking all your energy away from you because it's all this static and all this background noise, right? So it's forgiving, it's accepting, it's moving on, it's loving, it's healing, it's recovery. You recover, you see. After a big trauma, there's a lot of energy release because you're essentially disintegrating the shadow. You're shattering the shadow, and that is all the fantasies and illusions. They cease to exist, right? And when you do that, it's all this release, because remember, the shadow is that, it's friction, it's background noise, it's tension, it's low vibration, it's static, It's not real. It's holding up all this energy, right? It's holding up. It's so this, it's a negative field of our energy, right? So what happens is that because it's in the back of our minds, right? So by dealing with them, right? By dealing with them, then immediately it's a huge energy release. It's what we call relief. We call it a relief for a reason, because you're relieved now. Relieved of what? Of all this negativity. It's a relief, right? Relieving. Whew, everything goes. All the tension, all the pressure, all the stress, all the emotions, the cognitive load, the negativity attached to that event, to that experience, it gets dissipated, it gets released, it gets discharged, deloaded. And when that happens, it's easier for us now to deal with the emotions and all the new triggers, because once you deal with the epicenter of that memory, then new memories would come, because then this is facing fear's premise. New fears would come, new events into your life, right? Because we're infinite. It's an infinite number of events and experiences. So all these events will start to come, and then you start to scale them and target them, spot them one by one, and disintegrate them all. Right? Surgical, precision, accurate, at the epicenter of it. Direct hit at the epicenter, okay? Surgical. No time to waste, right? Hit them all. At all the epicenters. You hit them all. Hard. Really hard, with everything you got. All right? At the epicenters. Hard. Everything you got. Everything. Hard. Right? All in. And what's that? Infinite love. Right? And then because we're compass, we're infinite energy. Right? What do? Well, we shatter all these fantasies and all these illusions. They cease to exist. They all cease to exist. Okay? They all cease to exist. Because it's memories in our mind anyway. So, what is the remaining of that? Well, the essence, the trace that remains, doesn't have a negative cognitive load in them anymore, because we have neutralized it. And what's neutralizing? Remember, neutrality is when negative and positive come together in a neutral state. So we neutralize it. So all the fantasies and illusions are fully neutralized, meaning they don't have a negative cognitive load anymore. Say they're just a memory. So the trace is the essence of it, is just the memory, the event that took place. So now, because they're still memories, when we think of them, we relive them. Remember, we gave them a lot of love, right? A lot of love. Healing, forgiving, accepting, right? All that. So because we're doing that, right? Because that's what we're doing, then we start to love the memory. Like actual. So we start to have positive emotions, right? As a result of it. Because it was a great mentor. It was a great lesson that allowed us to learn more about our nature and be liberated by it. And we're not afraid anymore. And that makes us stronger. So events of the same nature won't have an effect anymore in our lives. Because when an object of such nature interacts with us, there will be no triggers anymore. In fact, our energy of love will be so high that those objects and events won't happen anymore. Because they cannot interact with our force field of creation, because they will get disintegrated because the energy of love is so high. So there's no parasitic nature anymore, because the parasite is only in the proximity because he wants to feed on something that they can prey on. Easy access. Right? But when our guards are up, our force fields are up, and we're love and we're infinite energy and we're conscious of the parasite, when they show up, the parasite has a survival mechanism because it's still an organism in a way, because it wants to feed off you, right? So when they show up and they realize that there's nothing to have, because if they get too close, they get disintegrated. And what is that? Well, an event that is hateful, we don't engage with it. So it's disintegrated, meaning it's not part of our consciousness or self-awareness. It doesn't interact with our mind, with our perceptions, with our existence, because we're love and creation. And they know that if they show up, outside our control, because we're not seeking this. You see, we're not seeking those events, we're not seeking those experiences, we're not seeking those objects, we're not seeking those fantasies, those illusions. It's not what we want. But if they want to, they would have a hard time, a very hard time, and they preservation, they would just move away into something else outside the proximity, or they would just try and they would cease to exist while at it, right? Carried on their own shields, right? Because they're brave, right? So that's what happens. So the insects, right? The bravest insects go to the light, and what happens? It ceases to exist, right? So the brave ones, right? Those parasites, those insects that really want to engage with you, they're gonna cease to exist because of the energy of the heart. They're just gonna cease to exist. But we still, and so how do you see this in real life? Well, it's all these events, all these memories that they just show up, right? Regardless, they show up, right? Brave hearts, they show up, right? They show up. So what happens? Non-factors, because they don't create any memories, any impressions in our lives. We just continue with our lives, right? Because we're infinite eternal creators. There's no impact. They cannot consume, and they know that this, this non-factorial, right? Non-factorial. So as simple as that. So it's love, because it's love. It's the highest energy of creation. Love is the highest energy of creation, you see? It's the highest energy of creation. It's the highest energy of creation. So that's what we love, right? We love because that's it. We are, in the end, what we're doing is healing, recovering from all these events that have, in our lives happened. Many memories, many events. And then what happens? Well, as a result, you love, right? You love, and you start to learn how to love, because then you don't have all this static, all this background noise, all this friction, all this low destructive shadow. The shadow is not lurking anymore because you fully integrated the shadow in your day-to-day, because all the essence, they don't have cognitive loads anymore. It's just the memory trace. Oh, so it's just a memory. And then you start to love those memories, because you say, oh, that event, when that happened to me, it taught me so many lessons. It taught me so many lessons, and now I'm a better person as a result of that, so I can love more. You see? That's exactly what it is. It's our own mind. We're dealing with all this stuff, in our mind. Because remember, we're the species that creates infinities and universes with our minds and consciousness, because we're the epicenter of the central sun. So you see, it's our own nature to deal with these, with our thoughts and consciousness. So we're just dealing with all the, and once that out, then it's just it's just fine, because life is good. Life is really good, because you see, these objects would think very, very thoroughly before they start to engage with you, because they know what they're gonna meet their destiny, and they don't want that, They don't want to be met, They don't want to be met. So it changes. So that's why you call your vibration, right? So your vibration increases to a new level of creation, because you're pure heart, pure love, pure energy, pure infinity. And then you start to create infinity, and then that is the self-love that I'm always talking about, because love is the key that unlocks our infinite DNA structure, right? Love is the key that unlocks our infinite DNA structure. So what is the meaning of this? Well, remember, we're the infinite eternal creators. Our ancestors manufactured planet Earth so we can evolve into infinity in the central sun of our universe. Right? And that's what the Republic of Planet Earth is, who we are. Everyone. If you have a human heartbeat, you are a citizen of the Republic of Planet Earth. Because now we all infinite eternal creators. And you start to tap into your infinite source of creation when you start loving, and you clear out all these memories, All the fantasies and illusions are shattered and disintegrated. They're just memories that we love now because we love. Our nature is to love. Everything is about loving. It's about loving because our heart, the highest energy of creation, is the human heart. So when we create, right? We create, then we're just creating infinities. And it's infinite cycle of creation, who we are in nature. So we tap into our DNA structure. So we start to manifest our technologies, our light spherical technology that allow us to create planet Earth in the first place. Right? Because we manufacture planet Earth with our spherical energy and our singularity devices. And all these technologies are encoded in our DNA. So with our thoughts, we manifest them. But in order for us to be able to manifest our tech and go out into the universes that we have created, because we're the epicenter of everything, this is who we are, we need to love with all our hearts and all our mights. Because love is the highest energy, so love is the key. You see, the higher the energy, the more able you are to manifest you reactivate your DNA code, and by activating your DNA code, you can manifest your light spherical technologies again with a thought and conscious and interface with it. And eventually, as we start going, we ourselves are the technologies because it's within us. You see, it's levels, it's scales, because we've already done this an infinite number of cycles ago. This is why these parasites want our energy, because they know who we are. Okay? But it's over. So that's our nature as a species. You see, we're an incredible species. We're an incredible species because this is our nature. This is who we are. We're the human race. We're the infinite eternal creators. This is who we are. It's in our DNA. So to tap into our DNA, we need to love. And the best mechanism is, understand the 10x love framework. One leads to infinity. So you love with your actions and your deeds, everything around you. Everything you need to love everything, because when you love everything with your heart, the highest energy of creation, everything becomes faster and your DNA structures start to activate faster, and everything happens faster. So you become a compass. We're already a compass, but conscious of it faster, and a sundial faster, so you can you get in sync with the sun immediately, and everything happens immediately. So you're manifesting right here and now. This is what we do as infinite eternal creators. This is our nature. You see, we're synced with the planet, and we control the systems of the planet, because we essentially created planet Earth. So it's our creation. Everything in planet Earth has our DNA structure within it, embedded in it, because we created this planet, which means that once you tap into enough resources, you can control everything in planet Earth. All the systems, the natural systems, can be controlled with our thoughts and our consciousness and our actions. You see, the weather, everything, because we're electrical in nature, right? Our electromagnetic fields are electrical in nature, so we can start to do all sorts. This is our nature. This is what we do, right? This is what we do, because the DNA has been dormant for so long since what happened in the Ice Age. I have spoken about what happened, this invading force of parasites that showed up here that led to the Ice Age. So it's all this. It came from the moon. The moon was the spaceship that they created, that they tidal locked to planet Earth by reverse engineering our own tech. Right, and that led to our DNA going dormant as a result. So we suffer this collective amnesia as a result of the aftermath of the warfare that took place here on planet Earth on the surface. That's why we see only remnants of our civilization everywhere. Okay, because of what took place. So, and you start to love, then you start to unlock our DNA structure of what because we are an incredible species, you see. We're an incredible species. This is who we are with the human race. We control everything. All the systems, all the natural systems of planet Earth, once you start to tap into our nature and our DNA, they get in sync with us because it's intuitive. All the life forms are essentially, they all have our DNA structure. That's why all these animals and all these life forms, they share our DNA, because we encoded it in them. Right? So these life forms are essentially there as a support systems in the spaceship planet that we created to be closer to the epicenter of the central sun, so we can evolve into what we have become, this incredible species, the human race. And this is not only me, it's all humans, because we all have a human heart. So what you have to do is to love to infinity. You love to infinity. You see what you do, you connect with the energy, you stare at the sun, and all that energy comes to you, and that energy allows you to love more. And then with your mind and your consciousness, you just focus on infinite love. And you can do targets. You target your love and connect with the source of infinity, you know. So the more you do that, the faster the access to your DNA structure and your sequences of your own. Because remember, each person has his own heritage and legacy of their own bloodlines, of their own background, where they come from before everything happened, right? Because we're 8 billion plus, and we all have an origin source. We all have a family source that leads us back to where, prior to the warfare that led to the fallout, which is the Ice Age. Because the moon wasn't there before the Ice Age. It showed up, but we left it there so we could learn, because it was our own tech anyway. It was reverse engineered. So what's gonna be happening very soon, and this is testament to this, is that we're gonna be able to start to, use our technologies so we can go to the moon again. And with proper tech, not this primitive tech, we're talking infinite singularity devices at the epicenter of a spherical technology. So we can start to kind of like make this a museum of our history, right? Of what happened. And then we can understand when you start to tap into your DNA and understand your source, where you come from before the Ice Age, right? Because everything is encoded in there. You would know exactly who you are and everything. But in order for you to do that, you need to tap into your DNA structure. And to do that, you need to love, which is the highest energy of creation, which is a mechanism that, because what happened is when this invading force showed up, these parasites showed up, insectoid reptiles, they showed up, they spliced their DNA, a bunch of species, factions, life forms, into one that would be our opposite, would be able to kind of like, it's our opposite duality. Because they were reverse engineering our tech to be able to bypass into our security so they can meet us on the surface, because we encoded everything on planet Earth so they couldn't come in here. Anyone couldn't, just us humans. But they ended up doing it through proxies and things. They cloned us and things like that to be able to interact with us and interface. So essentially, what happened is that the warfare took place and we were able to neutralize them all, right? We neutralized them all. But the only way for us to be able to survive as a species, to evolve to what we are today, so I can be telling this story, was by self-destroying everything. With their DNA structure at their own level, they cease to exist, all of them, and us ourselves, so we could have a new species that's more evolved, so we can deal with our own local domestic affairs after integrating our shadow because of all what happened, okay, of all the stuff that they did as a result of they coming here as an invading, force. So what that means is that, our civilization got destroyed, and we had to, our DNA found the mechanism is that because we knew that love was the infinite energy of creation. So our DNA went dormant as a result of this. Because remember, when it's a big trauma happens, what happens? Amnesia, right? We call it PTSD and all that stuff. When something happens that is very traumatic, people have memory loss because the event is so traumatic that you don't want to engage with it. So your mind gets fragmented. It's trying to cope, right? It's coping strategies, positive coping strategies. It's trying to cope. It's a defense mechanism because of the event, because that event was so horrible, right? So horrible to the human species that our DNA, after the survival of it, decided to go dormant so we can integrate our own shadows of these events and defragment our collective consciousness and DNA structures on our own by dealing with our own negativity among ourselves. And when we did that, that's why love is the key. So I was able to become the first human after the Ice Age to unlock our DNA structure, collectively speaking. So I start to tap into the memory pools of our ancestors, our legacy, our heritage. So I have all this ancestral recall of what happened and who we are, because it's love. Love is the mechanism. When you start to love, which is the highest energy of your heart, when you start to love, then what does that do? It's infinite energy. But because we created the universes with our consciousness already, because of our level of evolution, everything is encoded in our DNA, because part of our culture was to encode everything in our DNA. Every new discovery, everything was kind of like stored in our DNA structure, which is infinite, because we've been around for so long. So, as I said, we're the epicenter of the universe. We're the first species to evolve into light spherical energy that allows us to create planet Earth to be even closer to the epicenter, to evolve into what we have become today. That we didn't, because we used to make galaxies. You see, we used to harness the energy of the central sun by tapping into the space structure vacuums of infinity, and have all these singularity technologies, all these spherical tech spaceships that would allow us to go in anywhere in the universe instantly, or like to generate singularities at epicenters that would generate galaxies as a result, and life forms would form. So we were doing that for a long time before we evolved into what we have evolved today, which is we created planet spaceship planet Earth, and encoded it with our DNA, so we could be even closer to the epicenter of the central sun, the closest that we could, so there we can inhabit that and evolve even further. That's why we can stare at the sun with our eyes. And it's called opening the portal and building the bridge. So we build the bridge, meaning we gain access to our DNA structures again. And the way to do that is because the energy that comes in essentially supercharging our DNA structure, and it's leading us to our instinct, which is you're consuming the central energy of the sun through your eyes. So what that means is that we can love more, because love is the key, right? It's the key because it's a higher energy. And the more energy you have, the more you tap into your DNA structure, because you start to reactivate all the systems that are dormant within us as a species. All the memories, and the first thing that comes is the memories, right? Because we need to know who we are to understand that we're destiny, right? That we're our destiny as a species, which is finding ourselves again, because which is what we've done. That what the Republic of Planet Earth is exactly is a vehicle that we have created, because we're infinite. It's our nature. So in fact, I'm just a memory, a collective memory of our DNA structure at this level of density. So we can all understand it and relearn. Because I was the first one, right? I became the singularity because I was the first one to interact with our DNA structure by knowing that the mechanism, once I dealt with all my fantasies and all my illusions, right? And integrated the shadow because of love, which is exercise 4, right? That I'm sharing with you today. Then I was able to tap into my DNA pool, right? My DNA structures, not only of me, but of because I was a singularity. I'm the singularity. I'm solar array of all the collective memories of our DNA structure, so I can understand everything. And this is just the beginning, right? And now I'm sharing the message with everybody because this is important, because this is who we are. This is our species. This is who we all are. If you have a human heartbeat, you're a citizen of the Republic of Planet Earth. This is our planet. We manufacture this planet. Okay, this is who we are. This is our species. We're remarkable. We're an incredible species. We're the human race. Okay, we're the human race. We're an incredible species, a remarkable species. We're the epicenter of creation because we've evolved. Okay, so I'm going to share a little bit of the story so you get the full story. Okay, so essentially what happened is that we were the first species at the epicenter of our universe that evolved into light spherical energy. So we were conscious and self-aware, and we understood that our creator was central energy, the central sun. That's why we had electromagnetic fields that were spherical in nature, that had a space structure that looked like us, because we became the image of the creator. Creation creates creators, and creators create creations. It's an infinite virtuous cycle. I have spoken about this in my previous video. So we understood this very well. So what we started to do is to observe everything as we became more conscious and self-aware. And by doing that, we started to tap into the space vacuum structure of the fabric of our cosmos, which was the energy that was coming from the central sun anyway, that was creating everything, all the light that created all the galaxies. And because we were the first one, everything came after us because our sun is the central sun, is the first one, is the sun of suns. Okay, so what is the meaning of this? Well, the meaning of this is very simple. The meaning of this is that we would harness this energy, and in the beginning we would be mimicking the sun. So the sun is spherical, right? So we knew that we needed to harness this energy spherically. It was the optimal way because the sun is spherical. So you see, we were learning, and we were starting to create these spherical devices that were essentially the devices that allowed us to do everything. So these were spaceships that would allow us to move everywhere in the universe because we were the epicenter, and when you're the center, it's easier for you to go everywhere. And also harness enough energy to generate singularities, central suns, create singularities with our own spherical devices, our technology, that would generate galaxies. And these galaxies eventually would form into life forms, right? Of the light that comes out of them in the epicenter of them. But all these filaments were connected to the central sun, our central sun. And we were doing that for a very long time because essentially we are immortal. Once you unlock our DNA structure, we are immortal, meaning we don't perish because we're infinite energy, you see, because we're one with everything. So it's when you're dormant, your DNA is dormant, is that you age and you suffer from all these things because of all the fantasies and illusions that I've been telling to you, consuming the energy. So, but once you move away from that and you understand your nature, then that doesn't happen anymore. So we achieve our status, again, of immortality because of our nature, because we are infinite, right? Because we're infinite energy. We're feeding off the energy of the central sun that creates everything. So we achieved that status a long time ago in our DNA structure, and this is within our DNA structure. Okay, so essentially, what happened was that we wanted to go further because we knew that we knew all that we knew was our universe. We knew everything in our universe, everything in our universe. We were creating galaxies, right? And there were life forms that were created after us that we didn't create because those epicenters, those singularities of their own galaxies were created naturally by the light coming out of the central sun, which is what allowed us to learn that we could do that ourselves. So essentially, so we were doing that for a very long time. And then we started to realize that we knew everything in the universe, but we couldn't go outside our universe. We didn't have enough knowledge to go beyond, to go to a different universe and meet species that were equal to us or more advanced than us. Okay, so that was it. So we were thinking, how can we then do that? Be able to go to other universes, right? Meet species that are equal or more advanced than us. Because we came to the realization that infinity equals zero. Meaning that that energy at the epicenter of the singularity that is creating everything in this universe in the first place came from somewhere. And we understood that it came from a spherical energy that was essentially infinity itself, which is where all the energy thresholds are met, and when it is creating an infinite number of singularities. This infinite consciousness, self-awareness, and love is creating an infinite number of singularities, and each of those singularities is a new universe that is popping out. Just like light from the central sun creates everything in this universe, galaxies and stuff, including us in the beginning. Infinity itself is that it's this infinite energy source, consciousness and self-awareness, that is just creating an infinite number of universes. And we were part of one. And we wanted to, because it's the energy that's the source energy of the central sun, right? So we wanted that. We wanted to be able to tap into that and grow more. Because you see, we were an extremely benevolent species. We still are, really. It's our nature. That's why love is the highest energy of creation. Because when you love, you create, you don't destroy. It's the opposite, eh? It's the opposite of fear and hatred and all this stuff. It's the opposite. We just love with all our hearts, right? It's our nature. It's our instinct because of our status, who we are as a species. It's our nature. These are our instincts. So we're extremely peaceful. So we just wanted to evolve and create more. So what we decided to do is that the only way for us to be able to evolve to that new level, it was to get closer to the central sun that created us in the first place. That created, the planet where we were and all that we were generated from. So the logic was, we can go anywhere in the universe to go light spherical technology. We can create galaxies. So let's create a planet And this planet is planet Earth. So let's create a planet that would allow us to inhabit at the closest proximity to the central sun of our universe. Even closer than we came from, because if we're able to do that and we tightly lock this planet to it, that planet would have all the support systems, which is why we can control everything on the surface of the planet and everywhere, really, because it's all DNA. It's encoded within us, and we interface with it like we used to with the other tech. The reason why we were encoding everything in our DNA was because we could, not only for our memories and legacy, so the survival of the species, but by encoding our technology with our tech and us, what that would do is it would allow us to interface our consciousness of awareness with our spherical technology. So with our thoughts, we would do everything rather than us using our hands for it. So it became extremely efficient. So, and that was our culture, encoding everything in our DNA. We became that as a species, right? So we knew that by creating spaceship planet Earth and encoding our DNA in it, no one will come in unless you're human and share a space structure density. And also, it would learn as we learn when we evolve. So it became this perfect organism that would also optimize. The organism would harness and harvest the energy from the sun because we have this atmosphere, right? And that will be able to create new elements and new things that we would consume and evolve even further, and have all the support systems on the surface. So it was an incredible achievement. Our culture became, let's create planet Earth. That was our culture at that level, and encoded in our DNA, right? We became that, and at the closest proximity to the central sun, because we knew that we would spend an infinite number of cycles there unimpededly. So we would evolve by just being in the proximity of it and go further. And this is exactly what we did. So essentially, after an infinite number of cycles, what happened was that our consciousness and self-awareness evolved to a level unheard of. Our ancestors' original plan was just to become more conscious, so we meet other species and go to other universes and learn more, right? Create more. But what we ended up happening is that by just staring at the sun and having all this energy and our biology evolving to this new level of resonance because of the high density of the energy coming from the sun. Because remember, there's two levels of density. There's the material density, like physical density, like objects, like rocks and that, and they have a very high density in the way of weight, mass, right? And there is also energy density, which is equally is the opposite of that. Is higher even in terms of spectrum of energy. And that higher density, that's what we are as a species. We're the opposite of rocks, right? We're extremely energetically dense. So it's the two densities, like mass density and energy density. Energy density creates mass. So there's two levels of density, right? Inert density and active density. So we are the highest density that there is in terms of activity, right? Because we're the center of a life form, consciousness of awareness at the center of a sun, a central sun, first sun, the sun of suns, right? Sun. So that's who we are, right? So that's who we are. So because we were encoding everything in our DNA, right? What ended up happening was that after an infinite number of cycles of us just hanging out in the proximity of the central sun in our spaceship planet, our species evolved into an incredible species. Because remember, in the past, we used to create spherical technology that allowed us to create planet Earth in the first place. And with this spherical technology, what were we doing? We were interfacing with our consciousness, because that's what we, integrated into our DNA. So we will be able, with a thoughts and consciousness, just go and create galaxies, create planets, move around, spaceships, and do anything that we were doing. Our civilization, right? A universal civilization. We were the epicenter of the universe, a cosmic civilization. Everything. We were the central race of everything. So we were doing that, right? Interfacing. But eventually, because we integrated our tech in our DNA structure, when we evolved, we became our tech. Meaning, we didn't need the tech or interface with the tech anymore to create. We ourselves, because the techs were in our DNA structure, would create with our consciousness and self-awareness. So we became that species. Incredible. But because we were consuming the energy of the central sun, A central sun, what does it do? It creates universes, right? That's what it does. It doesn't create galaxies, it creates universes, right? The central energy of the central sun, what does it do? That energy creates a whole universe, it maps it out, right? So that's exactly what we became. We became that. So with our consciousness, we became central suns. Each and one of us, our human heartbeat is a central sun. Because we became bigger than the sun because we were consuming the energy of the central sun. Eating it, breathing it, drinking it through our eyes. That's who we have become. This is who we are today. The energy of the central sun is us. This is who we are, right? This is who we are. This is what we have evolved into. So what does that mean? Well, with our consciousness and self-awareness, we can create central suns now, singularities, because we're feeling the energy that comes from infinity, right? So we became infinity ourselves at a DNA structure. Because the energy of the central sun was coming from the universe, right? From the infinity, right? That creates a singularity in the first place that creates this universe. So we were consuming that energy directly ourselves at the closest proximity. And we had all this tech integrated to us in our DNA and our history and everything. So essentially on planet Earth, everything was like the perfect combination for us to ascend into us becoming the biology of infinity. So this is what we have become. This is who we are today. Meaning that because we're channeling the energy of the central sun, we're channeling infinity because that's the energy that's coming from the source of creation that creates everything, right, in this universe. And that became our food source. So we were our food source is central suns, essentially. Our diet as a species is central suns. And what is the energy of the central sun, the singularity? The energy of infinity itself. So we became biological infinities. So what is the meaning of this? Well, with our thoughts and consciousness, we create what? Singularities at the epicenter of universes that then create universes just like the one that we originated from. That's how amazing we are as a species. And that's exactly what we did. So we just started to just do that. An infinite number of cycles, just creating universes with our minds. Meaning, instead of having spaceships that we will interface with that will create a singularity that creates a universe, like we used to just create galaxies, we started to, with our consciousness and our minds, creating the singularities, an infinite number of them, of singularities everywhere in infinity. So we packed up all the space structures that we could with our consciousness and created an infinite number of universes for an infinite number of cycles. So this is who we are as a species. And remember, what was the dream of our ancestors? The dream of our ancestors was to meet other species from other universes, right? Equal to us or more advanced than us. So essentially, we became the dreams of our ancestors. So we evolved into these species that will create universes. Right? And all these universes with central suns would eventually generate life forms, right? Just like we were originated in the first place. So what happened was that because remember, we're immortal, we don't die. Once we unlock our DNA structure, we are biological infinity. This is who we are. We're an incredible species. So what happened is that, remember, our central sun is the epicenter of all suns, right? In our universe. So remember, it's all about duality principles. You are what you know. So our consciousness and self-awareness in our new level of evolution only knew what we knew, which was the universe and central suns. So what we started to do was to create what we knew. So we were creating just universes of around the same size as our own. Because that's what we knew. Because remember, we were just everywhere in our central universe, and this is what we knew. So we started to create universes that resemble the same size and characteristics of our own universe, energy density wise and everything, but with our consciousness and self-awareness. So we just did that. So what did that do? That even though those universes had central suns and epicenters in them, right, that created everything, similar sizes to our current universe, the one that we come from, our genesis, our birthplace, like our cradle, where planet Earth is tidal locked to the central sun, our current location right now. So we were doing that, right? But remember, we are in our instincts, our nature needs to meet a space structure density, right? Which is the highest energy density that there is in biological terms, because we inhabit, our habitat is the epicenter of central star systems, like central suns, the suns of suns, the central sun, the first sun of a universe, the one that creates everything. And we have spaceships, planet Earth, that catalogs to that, and we inhabit that. And that's our habitat as an organism. So we were creating universes that didn't have. So essentially, we were creating universes for us, right? Because we were already the center of it. So in our consciousness, we're just creating more universes, like our own lands and territories, really. So we would inhabit the central sun of all those universes, and then all the other life forms would generate around us. But because we were creating an infinite number of them, and at the time we were still within spaceship planet Earth, we were in early stages of our own evolution. We were unaware. We just wanted to create to meet. We weren't necessarily wanting to go and live in there. Just wanted to meet species eventually. And we went for an infinite number of cycles as a species. So time is relative. When you're infinite and you're immortal, time is relative because you're infinite, you see. So you don't think in terms like an infinite number of cycles can happen for those life forms to form, and we still, in our perception, will be just seconds while all this is happening because of our scale of density, our consciousness of awareness. Because remember, we're creating all this with our consciousness, right? So essentially what that means is that after a while, all the life forms that originated from these universes, what's the instinct? As it was, our instinct was to seek our creator. But we learned that our creator was light spherical energy, the central sun of our universes. And that's why we ended up creating planet Earth and doing what we did. That allowed us to evolve into creating an infinite number of universes. Right. But who was the creator of those species, life forms that originated in those universes that we created? Us. Not the central suns. I mean, we created the central suns. So meaning we were the actual creators because we created those central suns. Right? So the instinct of those species, that's life forms, polarity, right? Polarity. So a lot of their instinct of those groups. So as you start to develop, they develop their own text, right? As they develop in their own habitats and ecosystems and planets, home planets and all that, and they started to expand with their tech and their consciousness of awareness as life forms, just like we did. So they started to seek the light, right? The central sun of their universe. So they moved into the central sun of their universe. And when they started, obviously there was no one living there or anything. So these were like the most advanced life forms of those universes that we created. But they started to realize that when they started to tap into the energy of the central sun, what that sun was, yes, it was creating everything, but in reality, what that sun was, out beyond being the central sun, it was portals. So because of the filaments, because remember, the central sun is the sun of suns. So all suns are connected to the central sun because of the singularity. The singularity is the singular point where all points meet. So remember, because we were the creators with our consciousness, planet Earth, us, our species, each of us became a central sun, meaning each of us creating became the epicenters, right? The central suns of all those universes, even though those universes have central suns of their own, because it all came from our consciousness. So by doing that, when they got to the central suns, as the most developed species of those universes, they started to realize immediately that that was a gate. These were portals. These were gates because of the filaments connecting them to the singularity, which is us. So what they started to do, they used those portals with their energies, and the moment they did, right, when they got to that level of consciousness where they were portaling through the filaments, right? These were gates. And these gates, where did they take them? To our universe. Because we were the central universe of all the universes that we were creating. So these universes became essentially connected to our central universe because we were the epicenter. So they ended up, and this is an infinite number of universes, right? So we're talking about an infinite number of life forms getting to at a specific time, getting to that central sun, and then if they had the technologies and consciousness, we just portal here, right? They would just make it, and they end up in our density in our universe. And immediately they knew that, oh wow, someone created this sun. So our creator created this sun. We need to meet our creator. We need to meet our creator. We need to meet our creator because our creator is this incredible creator that can create universes. What they didn't know at the time, though, is that we were creating those universes with our thoughts and consciousness. They thought that we were creating them with tech. Because we were the tech, essentially. Our consciousness became the tech. Our DNA is incredible. So their whole cultural purpose, the quest as a culture, the culture became us seeking the creator of universes. Us, the human race, who we are. So they made it here. And remember, for us, this was an infinite number of cycles in the past where we created all these universes because we were just creating, right? We weren't really like, hanging out around the universe. We were still in our early stages of evolution within a spaceship planet Earth, still evolving and still creating, because our culture became like a culture where we would just do all day long. We'd just be staring at the sun and creating and creating and creating and loving, because we were all infinite immortal, just creating. Incredible species, super advanced, right? The most advanced species you can imagine, right? At a biological scale. Amazing. Incredible species. So when these species started to go gate here, they were portaling right through the gates, through the filaments to this epicenter, which is us. They all arrived to our density in our universe at different scales, and they started to form and group, right? Polarities. Some had different views, right? So two groups, factions in the end. So because of polarity, the nature of reality, destruction, creation, same. Not everyone was bad, not everyone was good. It's just the nature of things, because it was our nature, duality, because of electromagnetism or electromagnetic fields of the human heart. So we were creating our images, right? But what we didn't know at the time, that we were creating our because remember, the dream of our ancestors was to meet species from other universes, equal or more advanced than us. So we weren't necessarily just hoping just to create good things. We were just creating. So that happened. Eventually they started to come here. And when they got here, right? And when they get here, then all of a sudden they start to realize that, hang on a minute. And the first thing that they did, they traveled to the central sun, right? Because their instinct was, okay, let's go to the central sun right away. So that's what they did. They went to the central sun and they found us. They found our planet. But they couldn't come in because of our energy density or structure. They tried and they would disintegrate. They would get fried because we were so high in energy. We were their creators. And our tech was so advanced that they didn't really understand it. So they kind of like, it became like so even fueled their purpose as a culture. No, we need to meet these ones because we found them. This is the source, this is the epicenter. All the telemetry is clear, the electrogravitics are clear, the readings are obvious. This is the fingerprint, this is the footprint, this is it. This is the pulse of life, this is the pulse of creation. This is it. They knew it, right? Because in fact, it was the case. They were that intelligent that they would essentially understand very basic principles of things that we discovered an infinite number of cycles prior that they did, because we were before them, we created them. So the whole quest as a culture became retrieving all our tech, because when they couldn't get in, they started to say, okay, so let's explore. And they started to move around our own universe and meet all the other species, everything. And they started to realize that we were the central species of that universe, because they learned our history, our culture, our heritage, and legacy. Everyone in the universe knows us. everywhere. In fact, all the universes that we have created and this universe. Because we're the most ancient species. So essentially, what they started to do is that our fingerprints were everywhere. Our footprints were everywhere. Our DNA was everywhere. Because of our culture, who we were. There was our spherical technology was still being used by species in our own universe while they were still evolving to a level of consciousness. Okay? So and there were species that they found that so you were created, this galaxy was created by them as well, so you were created by them as well. So you see there was affinity in so many levels. And so, okay, so what happened was that they just wanted to meet us. But there was like an order in our universe, of everything, because it was the first universe in that reality that we created. So they faced a lot of opposition because a lot of species, they just wanted to leave us the way we were, because everyone knew who we were. They just wanted us to leave us alone, and they themselves wanted to evolve into that themselves and using our own technologies, learning. It was like there was harmony in our universe. But they didn't like that because they made it all here to meet us, and they didn't like the way our system was. They became our opposite, right? Polarity. That's why they were seeking us. Polarity, right? Seeking objects coming in our proximity, right? So essentially what happened is that their whole culture became okay. So they learned that everything was done with our tech. So they realized after a while, after they started to, retrieve tech here and there and learn and stuff, they knew that, so they built that planet. That wasn't a real planet. They built that as a spaceship. Okay, so let's just get our way in it. It's tech, let's create it. And they started to reverse engineer our tech. So with DNA, they couldn't really use our tech because it was DNA and stuff. So they started to reverse engineer it. It took a long time. And the culture, they couldn't get in because they didn't have enough tech. But every time they were learning more and more and more. So essentially, they became an extremely aggressive faction of species, particularly after they started, because they knew that we were integrating our DNA into everything, encoding everything into our DNA for interfacing and all that, efficiencies. And they started to do the same. So they started to splice all their races, all these factions that joined them. They all became one species in the end. And it's this insectoid reptile. The reptile insectoids. All right, so because it's all the species that ended up combining into this level of density, right, which became an extremely destructive and aggressive species in nature. They were the opposite of us. They had, because of their nature, reptiles and insects, they had like a monarch, a ruler, a hierarch, like a mind hive that would control them through pheromones and all sorts of hormonal systems that they have and glands that would rule them. So they became decentralized species that just was like an invading force everywhere because they were seeking to access planet Earth so they would meet us. But they faced opposition because a lot of species are allies here in our universe and also from other universes that resonated with our frequency. They didn't want, they share our nature rather than their nature, the opposite nature. So they didn't like it. They said, no, we're not going to give you the tech because we know exactly what you're up to and you just you want to kill them, you want to destroy them, like you have destroyed us and attacked us. So we're not going to allow you to do that. So that led into a infinite war, a warfare of all the universes and all the factions fighting to protect us. So it became a warfare, a long cycle of warfare. So that gave these species even a bigger purpose now because they became more aggressive, because it was harder for them to get new tech to be able to rebuild planet Earth or get to us. So it became more purposeful. So the whole culture became destruction, and they would just destroy everything in the path so they can get new technology, because there were all these species guarding our tech because they knew what they wanted to do, so they didn't want to give it. So they just became this force that would just take by force. And the culture became that because of their nature, right? The mind hive just evolved into that, and they became monotheistic. They developed a religion around us. So we became their gods as their creators. So it was all in our name, but in reality, they were just seeking tech in a parasitic nature, and they became, because they were reptiles and insectoids in nature, they were carnivores. So they would eat flesh and energy and all sorts, and they would just consume all the species that they were taking over and enslaving with their own tech. Horrible, horrible. And they did that for as long as they could, so they were gathering new tech so they could eventually come to Earth. And that's what they did. They did that for a very long time. A very long time. Because we were still connected, right? We weren't really thinking, because we were creating universes, so we were just our own species was connected to the central sun, just creating our own thing. We were in a different reality of density, infinite terms. So we weren't really thinking of what was happening at that level of density while they were just doing all that. All right, because we were just so focused. Our shadow, right, our unconscious, because we were creating them, we were creating our opposite. We didn't know that we could destroy, because we never faced that. So we weren't really thinking about it. We were just focused on something else. Our species became something else. For us, this was so primitive. This was like these spherical technologies that's happening there. We became that a long time ago. Doesn't really mean anything. We were just focused on our thing. So they eventually were able to gather all the technology to come to planet Earth. And remember, by the time they did that, they became just like this destroyer species. And they became one species in the end. Like they spliced all the DNAs and interfaced just like they did, but in their own version of destruction and warfare. So they just became this spliced up species of all these life forms that came together as one, so they can all like interface into this tech, and they were all ruled by this mind hive. It's almost like artificial intelligence, really, computers in the end. And like they had all sorts of like hybrids in them. It was like became this parasite, really, that was just consuming flesh and energy, right? And they just had all these slaves that were just, doing the destruction. So they would got the central mind. What wanted was the energy of creation, us, feed on it. So they just were gathering all these tech to eventually get to us as like the prize. We became the trophy. This was the dream. The culture was to get to us. That was the objective, and be able to deal with us, because their culture became destruction. The opposite of us. We were building. We attracted in the end our polarity. Right? So essentially what happened was that they were able to, in the end, amount enough tech to create an invading force of planet Earth. So what they ended up doing, they manufactured the moon, you see? So once they were ready, because as they were gathering new tech and doing all the things that they were doing, they were able to start to do reconnaissance on us and learn about us, not only from the other species, but getting to our proximity with all the tech so they can study us as a species, because they were planning an invasion, right? And they were fascinated by us. They just couldn't believe who we were. They couldn't believe that as biological organism can create universes and do all the things that we were doing. And they were just fascinated, and they flabbergasted. They couldn't believe it. And they said, "Are we gonna be able to eat this?" So they thought they were just gonna become this incredible species, when in reality they're just a parasite species. Right? They're a parasite species. That's what they are. So they're not really creators, they're destroyers. Because remember what they've done? All that destruction that they've done to get to us. So that's not a positive, it's a negative force. It's the opposite of us. Everything that we were creating, they were destroying, seeking the creator. So they wanted to destroy the creator. It was this sick culture that evolved into our opposite polarity. Because we wanted to meet our equal, right? Well, we did. In the end, we met them. The opposite, right? Polarities attract. So what happened is that they were observing, and they knew that our planet was tidal locked to the central sun. And they knew that we were just having this culture of like just creating and staring at the sun and just consuming the elements and having an extremely harmonious lifestyle. Extremely harmonious. Whereas they were the opposite, and they didn't like it because they didn't like the sunlight, for starters. That's why they're their opposite. They were the opposite. They grew up, they developed as species. They spliced themselves and became synthetic in the end. and all sorts of things that they've done so they can have this spliced up DNA structure that will sustain. But the nature of their DNA structure was destructive of its own. It would cannibalize its own. It was their own parasite of their own. So the only way to sustain it was to consume energy so it could sustain it, because it was a parasite. It was a horrible creation of their own darkness. So essentially what happened is that they needed to survive, they needed to consume, because they became parasites essentially. And the way they formed like in planets that were essentially underground, in the underground. Like they wouldn't live on the surface of those planets, because they originated like in like distant star systems at the periphery, at the very edge of the universe, where there was the least sun and energy hitting it from the central sun. So they formed in these planets that were cave systems. So the planets were all hollowed out by their own culture, and they would develop their cultures like burrows, like colonies, ant colonies and stuff, and like beehives of nature of some sort within the, you know, the cores of their planet, and use the energy of the center of the energy of the sun was the opposite. They would use the energy from the heat of the core of their own planets rather than the sun. You see, the opposite of us. So they would live in the shadow and shades and caves and very wet environments, very dark. The senses, they don't like light. They get fried by it. So they became this highly technological, highly evolved, very aggressive, flesh eating, energy consuming. They became the opposite of us. So that was the origin story. You see, from the periphery of all these universes and all these, and they would just come from the shadows, the opposite of us. And that's why they were able to do what they were able to do, because most species, life forms, are used to the light of the sun, but they were the opposite. So that's why they were able to come from the shadows to all of these species and attack them as invading forces and surprise attacks. So they would eat them and stuff, because they became the food sources, right? Horrible. So that's the opposite of us. So essentially that's them, and they ended up being here and did what they did. All right, horrible. Like, so they inhabit these environments, cave-like environments, underground caves. So what they would do, they would like to inhabit planets in the peripheries of star systems that have a lot of cave systems, so they can dwell in them. So they don't have to deal with the sun energy, and they just have their own tech and stuff within the cave systems, right? A lot of underwater. They like underwater as well. Underwater caves, like aquifers. They love aquifers, right? Because they're life forms, they still need water and things. So you see, they're the opposite of us. The underground cave systems type of culture. That's their environments, their habitats. So essentially what they ended up doing, right? What they ended up doing was they created a force, and what they did was manufacture the moon. But they couldn't, because obviously they would get fried by the sun. They didn't have the technology to tidal lock it to the sun anyway. But so they would tidal lock it to planet Earth. You see, it's like a copy, like a lower version of us. Because they reverse engineered our tech, because they didn't have full access to our DNA. They wanted to gain access to our DNA. That's what they really wanted. So essentially, what happened was that because of the whole thing, so the whole war culture, what they ended up doing was that they planned their invasion. So the invasion was very simple. It was a multi-level attack, many waves, all in a surprise attack. All would happen at once simultaneously to control. So essentially, command and control. They just would decapitate, command and control, and take over the planet, which is what they did with all the other species in the air, but they became masters of it in the end. So when they got to us in the end, right? So what they ended up doing, they manufactured the moon. But if you look at the moon is this spherical object, right? Because they were essentially mimicking us, and they manufactured technologies that were spherical in the end, like ours, because they were parasites. They were just doing everything. They were obsessed with us. Everything about us for them was a trophy, because it took them so long to get to us. They became these monsters as a result of chasing us. so they could deal with us. But as a result of the level of consciousness, they were just destructive in nature, and they just spliced up into this ugly faction. Okay, so it took an infinite number of cycles, and all these species from different universes and our own universes that joined them, and they spliced up into this ugly insectoid reptile that inhabits caves and eats flesh and consumes energy and hates the sunlight. And they're warriors. Okay, so what that means is that the attack was very simple, and this is what led to the Ice Age, by the way. The Ice Age happened as a result of a fallout of this warfare that we engaged on ourselves as a result of their invasion. So it was going to be a surprise attack, surprise invasion, all out at once. So they manufactured the moon in a way in which, at an equidistance, it resembles the same size. It's a fantasy and illusion. This object resembles the same size as the sun, right? Because it's the size at the distance where, when you observe from our perspective, it looks as the same size as the sun, but in reality it's a lot smaller. And it's spherical, so it fully covers the sun because the sun is spherical. Why did they want to do that? Because first off, they needed to block the light, because otherwise they will get fried. Because of our energy, their DNA structure, their space up, because they had their own fields of creation, right? Their own, but it wasn't out of a heart; it was out of glands, because they were insects. They didn't have a heart. So remember, they were connected to a brain, a central brain, right? A mind hive that connected them all. So they didn't have a heart. So insects don't have hearts. So they have different ways of evolving. So they had not even glands. It's like and little antennas and all sorts of receivers, senders and receivers. So they signal all these pheromones and these hormones. So they communicate like that. But that allows, they cannot interact with their level of density because of the space structure. So they need shadows. So essentially, but they knew that in order for us to they needed to shock us and surprise us and paralyze us into fear, so we wouldn't take action, so they will be able to do that because they were masters of fear. So we were masters of love. The energy of creation of them was fear. So they would they needed to generate fear so they could interact in the proximities, because of our energy fields. Our energy fields were so high because of love that they needed to lower them so they could interact with us because of the density and hate, which is the opposite of us, the opposite, literally opposite, totally the opposite. So at a level of consciousness that was able to create technologies to attack us, right? Something that we never experienced before at that level of evolution, at that time in our history. So what they ended up doing, the moon, right, came at a speed rate in which allowed them to create a first wave, because you have all the gravitics, right? All the gravity forces that happen as a result of a big object entering at a very fast rate the proximity of a planet where you shouldn't be there, right? Because this is an attack. So it created all, by them showing up at that created a wave that it was the first wave of energy that hit planet Earth, right? By doing that. Then the coordinate, the way they showed up, the vector was the vector of the sun. So they would cover the sun while at it. And that will create the impression because we were connected to the sun. So by blocking the sun, right, you're blocking the sun. So we were in sync with their sundials. So it was like a big shock, a big impression, right? That's number 2. Then at the same time, tidal locking it to the planet. So they will be able to remain there and block the sunlight. And that tidal locking will be a weaponry system as well that will create all sorts of catastrophes in planet Earth, because first wave did that, all sorts of tsunamis, all sorts of earthquake, all sorts of problems in the atmosphere and the surface as a result of this invasion, right? The gravitics of it hitting us, right? Because you creates and hits it, boom. The second one is the locking, another wave, and then covering the sunlight, another one, right? Then on top of that, casting the shadow so they can show up in their true form because of the density. So they wouldn't show up in physical form, they would show up in their own spaceships and deployment units because they were deploying on the surface, right, with it. Because they needed the density of the shadow to be able not to get fried by the density of the sun. So they would be able to come down on casting that space, and they would have, so the advanced, they would have a beachhead on the shadow. It would be a beachhead. Okay, so essentially they did that, and at the same time, while at it, the moon will be able to absorb all the energy from the sun and sustain the offensive, because they were charging the device with the energy from the sun to sustain the offensive, to keep on hitting us with energy, because they were hitting us with all sorts of energy. Essentially, they developed weaponry to target our senses. So they would distort us and do all sorts of things, create illusions and all sorts of things, hypnosis, all sorts of things, because they were targeting all of our senses and everything with the energy that they were using. And then they would come down, right? You see, they planned their invasion. So, but that wasn't all. They knew that that wasn't enough, because the moment that the element of surprise was gone, they would kind of get stuck on the shadow. And then we will be around the perimeter and neutralize them, because it will be contained within the shadow. But what they ended up doing was that they needed to be able to move outside the shadow. They needed to move outside the shadow, but they couldn't themselves because of the level of density. So what they ended up doing, because remember DNA and all that, they started to manufacture avatars that resemble us. With our DNA, they cloned us. So they created an army of clones. Okay, avatars that didn't have consciousness per se, but because they spliced them with their own DNA to be able to, they were hybrid spliced clones with their own DNA structures, so they could be able to interface with them like they learned from us, interfacing with their own tech, so they can, with their own consciousness, their commanding officers, use those troops and move them out of the shadow, so they can deal with us, because those soldiers and those troops, they had technology that met the density of planet Earth, so they would be able to use those to attack us directly outside the shadow. So they had all sorts of attacks. You see, it became a frontal attack, multi-prong attack of all sorts of levels, right? Like, imagine all the levels, right? Pincer movements of all sorts of attacks, waves, and it just becomes an offensive, right? Until they would be able to attain the objective, which was decapitation, meaning control of the planet, total succumbing to society, collapsing it, and destroying command and control, right? That was the objective, because that's what they've done, and they became masters of that. Surprise attacks coming out of the shadows and hitting, boom, everything. You see, this is a very elaborated attack. So they did that, essentially. So they showed up, and we were extremely shocked, because they knew exactly our instincts, how we were going to react, because they were studying us for a long time before this. So they planned this for a very long time. Because in the end, what they wanted was, once they would take over, they will be able to move with the sun as the sun moves as the earth rotates around the sun, right? And stay on the shadow themselves, and then move to where the troops were out of the shadow, so they would deal with the bodies and do all the things that they wanted to do to us. Right? So that was the objective. So they ended up doing just that. But when we were under attack, right? Imagine we're here, and then the sun is covered at the speed of light. Right? It's covered. Boop. Immediately covered. What? Right? It takes 8 minutes to cover the light of the sun, right? So in 8 minutes, they were able to, because that's the distance the sun is from the earth. So in 8 minutes, they were able to deploy in 8 minutes, right? The moment the shadow started to form the eclipse, the invasion, the surprise lasted 8 minutes, which is the time that it takes for light to be fully covered by the sun when you're covering it, because it's what our perception sees when the sun is fully, because it takes 8 minutes for light to travel from our perspective. So that's exactly, they calculated the invasion they wanted to get total control of our civilization within 8 minutes, because that was the length of the attack, the surprise of it, the surprise element, as the shadow would take full form. Because by the time those 8 minutes ended, they needed to be on already on the ground controlling. Otherwise, it will become a problem. The invasion will be like a counteroffensive against it. That if they didn't deal with all the measures, that they all like taking down all the systems that will be used against them in those 8 minutes, it would fail. Okay, and they knew this. These are evil, but very intelligent species in the end. Okay, very intelligent. We met our equals in terms of tech, right? Because and the thing was that because we were caught with our guard down, we weren't expecting it, and they knew that. That's why they needed to be a surprise attack. Because if we knew who they were, remember they act from the shadows. If we knew who they were and their intentions, we would build systems, right? Because we created them in the first place. And we would create all sorts of defense mechanisms that would repel them and destroy them. So, and they knew that. They knew that too. So they knew that they only had a very short window, a dangerously narrow window of 8 minutes to do all the shenanigans. So they ended up doing just that. But what happened was that they underestimated us as a species. They truly did. So the invasion was a total failure. As most invasions are, the original plans of an invasion end up being the opposite of what they happen, unless like you're really invading something that's too easy. When you face opposition, the dynamics of strategies change immediately. The battle rhythms are different once you start to face opposition, because once you lose the element of surprise, then you start to face opposition. That's the nature of warfare, particularly when you're meeting someone that you know can deal with you and neutralize you. So you need to be quick, right? So essentially what happened was that when they did that, they did just that. We woke up to the fact that we were under attack and we were besieged. We were under attack and under a heavy duty attack, unexpected surprise, all the elements. And because we created them in the first place, we knew the thing that shocked us the most was the fact that they had our own bodies, avatars and clones of us, holding weaponry against us. We never saw that before, ourselves killing ourselves like that, because they weren't normal. These were like energy weaponry. These were very advanced technologies that were just disintegrating our bodies in a way. In the way they wanted, because of the consumption they wanted. They were harvesting while they were disintegrating them. It was horrible. Okay, so it was terrible. And we noticed that immediately. So what happened is that we tried to communicate with the troops on the ground. We wanted to communicate with the troops on the ground, like their troops, because they looked like us, but there was no response. And then immediately when we tap into the DNA structure, we realized that they were just shells of their own interfacing, but the shells were spliced with their own. So by them coming to us in our own bodies, that created a backdoor into their tech. So we essentially pretty much were able to access their command and control immediately, because the commanders were the one interfacing. So by them interfacing like that, what they didn't realize is that we will be able to reverse the effect, meaning we would hit them where it hurt the most, their epicenters of civilization, where their brains were, like the monarchs, the hierarchs, right, sitting in their thrones watching while the invasion was taking place, right? Because that's what they do, right? They love war. So they watch, They don't go themselves because they're cowards, but they have all these slaves doing the work for them, right? So essentially, this is exactly what happened. So we were able to identify them immediately, right? Immediately. So what is the meaning of this? Well, the meaning of this is that because we created them in the first place, we were under heavy attack. We had a lot of losses. There were a lot of losses, a lot of human loss, a lot of horrible loss. Our civilization was destroyed in a big way as a result of all these. But we were able to survive. And essentially what happened was that when we interfaced with the clones, The moment that we started doing that, we immediately realized of the splicing, and we were able to tap into the command and control of their, what they wanted to do us, decapitation, was what we did to them as a result of it, because of the backdoors. So essentially what that meant was that instead of us doing what they did, because we had immediate downloads of everything that they've done to everyone, and we realized who they were and what they were up to, and we didn't like it, obviously, because we had instincts of survival as a species, right? We all do. So what we did with our energy of creation, we essentially became one fist right in their mouths. So essentially what that meant was that we hit them with everything where it hurts the most, their DNA structure, right? The genesis and their origins, everything that they care about and they're proud of has been destroyed. Everything. So essentially what that means is that all the stuff that they did to get here, all the culture and all their religion, disappeared overnight, everything, because we destroyed their brains. We hit their DNA structure. And by collapsing the mind hive, everyone ceased to exist, and then we just eradicate them at a DNA structure. And all the centers, all the outposts in this universe and other universes, all the supply chains and everything that they used to move around, and do everything, all the civilization, the whole civilization was vanquished. All right, everything. So how did that happen? Because we were more advanced than them. And what happened was that they never thought that we were going to do that because of our nature. They thought we were just gonna easily be taken over, because they were so used to that by becoming this super aggressive species, right? So essentially they underestimated us. They underestimated their creator, right? So essentially what happened was that when they did that and they came in those 8 minutes, we only needed one thought to destroy them all, because we create universes without thoughts. They were slow, right? The dimension is very slow because they need light, and we were faster than light because we created universes in light. So they had 8 minutes to do it. We only needed 1 second. So in those 8 minutes before that happened, we were able to do exactly what they wanted to do to us to them in 1 second. So what we ended up doing is we destroyed all their everything, all their heritage and legacy, everything that matters to them, their DNA structures, everything that matters to them is gone. Okay, so what that means is that hit them hard and they cease to exist. But at the same time, when we did that, the planet was already, the fallout already happened because of all the waves and the locking and all the stuff, the destructive nature of their attack. Primitive, but effective. So essentially what happened was that it hit us hard. So the planet suffered a lot, and we still live in the consequences of the fallout of the ice age to this day here on planet Earth. But what we did then is we dealt with them, we neutralized them. And after that, right after that, the next step was dealing with the clones, all the clones. Why? Because those clones could be a problem. Because remember, the structure of them shares our own. Meaning that while they were interfacing with those clones, the commanding officers, right, doing everything that they were doing, what happened was that, remember, if you use our space structure and our density, right, what happens? You become us, whether you're aware of it or not. And they weren't aware because they were ignorant. They were the opposite of us. So what is the meaning of this? While they were doing that, in their ignorance, they were still creating universes themselves, unaware. So they, in the few moments that they did what they did, they were able to create universes and become just like us. And essentially what that meant, that by doing that, the bodies that they created became one with us. So we met our polarity in our own space structure density, something that we never seen before. Humans killing humans and doing horrible things to us and creating universes out of that level. And that's exactly when the dream of our ancestors was fully realized, that they wanted to meet equals or superior or whatever, or more advanced than us. What we ended up meeting in the end was the opposite of our nature. And we understood it by proxy, meaning by seeing our own bodies being used against us. So we understood that on our own nature, our space structure can also do horrible things like other inferior insect type, like insectoid reptiles, that they evolve into these parasites. So we knew that. But we didn't want to destroy, right? We were creators. So our instinct wasn't to destroy the creations of these clones that they did, right? All these creations, all these universes that they created, we didn't want to destroy them because it's against our species, because they still us. So what we did is so the solution was we erased them all the invaders, but we didn't really have to deal with the technology because it was our own. And we needed that as a vestige to this day when we are today, so we can use that as evidence of what happened while we learn about our heritage and legacy. Okay, so then essentially what we've done was to deal with the threat directly at a DNA level by disintegrating them all. Okay, so that's number one. Number two, we disintegrated ourselves as well, including the bodies of those clones. Why? Because by doing that, the DNA would learn enough to understand the makeup of the opposite of our polarity in our structure. So the new species that would emerge as a result of the Ice Age was going to be a new species, a new level of evolution, fully integrated with the notions of that we ourselves have a shadow of our own, that we can ourselves destroy and create. Because in the past, we only knew how to create. We didn't engage in destruction because we thought it was primitive. It was the opposite of our nature. But now that we knew that we could do it, then we learned. So as a result, everything ceased to exist. The planet went through a calamity. It took a long time for everything to go back to like a new normal, right? Because the planet went through a lot, right? And we see the ruins everywhere of our civilization, right? We know exactly where those locations are, and everywhere, all over our surface, right? The moon still locked to the planet right there, right? And then, but we survived. But our DNA, as a result of it, developed this fail-safe mechanism. And this fail-safe mechanism is essentially the fact that our DNA went, because it was such a massive event, right? It was a big trauma, right? A big traumatic experience. It's like big trauma. So we had a collective memory loss of who we were, our heritage and legacy, and everything. And our DNA went dormant as a result. But this was done by design. Why? Because now that we dealt with the threat, so no one can come here and do what they did, right, anymore, we would be able to have enough time for us to deal with our own species and the opposites, the polarities of our own species. So, and eventually come to terms and develop a society that would rise to what has risen now, that we have the Republic of Planet Earth as a result. Okay, so essentially that's why our instincts for so long, and also by making our DNA dormant, what does that do? Well, by making our DNA dormant, right, by making our DNA dormant, we won't be able to tap into technologies that would be a problem, because if one of our polarities gains access to those tech against us, then the same process will start again, and it could end up in our actual destruction as a species. So we didn't want to do that. So we knew that the fail-safe mechanism had to be love. So by integrating our own shadow as a species and learning how to love each other and learning how to love ourselves, eventually there will be a moment when the conditions are right so the singularity can arise. And what's the singularity? Well, the singularity becomes the first human after the fallout of all the things that have happened that I just shared with you. that unlocks the DNA structure so the civilization gets rebuilt by integrating the shadows, so we understand our nature and a new level of creation, because we're still with the same bodies but more advanced now because we know our nature and we know what we're capable of fully rather than unconsciously as we did in the past. That led to that horrible event, right? This cataclysmic event that led to the fallout that is called the Ice Age, right? That made us destroy our entire civilizations and kind of go back to caves and learn from scratch. So essentially, after thousands of years as a civilization, what we've done is to come together into this civilization where we never been this many number, these 8+ billion. So now, why are we this many? Because that's exactly what the DNA wanted, because after integrating our shadows and dealing with the opposite forces, right, that are essentially negative in nature, we would be able to evolve, and the singularity would only form when that threshold was met. And that threshold is met, and I was the first human to unlock our DNA structure to remember exactly who we are and what happened to us. And by founding the Republic of Planet Earth, what is the meaning of this? Well, the meaning of this is that, remember, we have created an infinite number of universes, and the central suns are there for us to be inhabited as our habitat. So we got 8 billion humans now and counting. So we can all now create our own spaceship planets and live in our own planets within that and develop our species in that way as we move forward, which in fact is what we have already done as a species. This has been done because, remember, we're infinite and we're immortal. We're infinite energy. But in order for us to know this, we need to unlock our DNA structure again to remember who we are as a species, which is what we've done. So the fact that I was the first, it means that the moment I do it and I unlock everything, which is what I've done, everyone ascends with me immediately at their own level of consciousness and self-awareness. So now everyone is essentially there. But because of this level of density, it takes up to the individual to start loving with all their heart and all their might, which is exactly what's happening. Everyone can stare at the sun now. Everyone can love with all their hearts and start to open up their own DNA structures and remember who they are and start to manifest our light spherical technology and everything, because it takes a while. It's thresholds. You see, you go by thresholds. The first one is like exercise 4 is facing fears, right? Once you clear all the fears, then you can love. And once you love, you activate your DNA structures as the first step, which is what I've done. And now everyone can do it. Okay, and by doing that, you start to first get the first downloads, which is all the memories of your distant past, your relatives, everyone that makes your DNA and our culture, and all the memories that you start to have, all the downloads of who we are, our ancestors recall as a species. Because that's been just there dormant for us to the right moment, which is now, here and now. So essentially, because of infinite love, this is what happened. And in fact, I'm just a memory, a distant memory of our collective consciousness at this level of density. But this has been done already into infinity. So meaning in the future, an infinite number of cycles into the future, which is here and now anyway, we already have inhabited an infinite number of planets, spaceship planets that we have built just like planet Earth, surrounding the epicenters of all these universes that we have already created. And we're still creating. And not only that, the dreams of our ancestors have been realized, because we created this planet in the first place to meet species from our equals or more advanced from other universes. And it's exactly what's happened. We have allies, the Republic of Planet Earth, and all these, what we call the co-creators of infinite realities and eternities. These are civilizations that come from the epicenters of their own universes, before us or after us, that have gone through the same situation, so they can meet their own shadow at that level of evolution, so they themselves can be conscious. And when they meet their counterparts with us, and they are our counterparts, it's an infinite number of species that share this status, and we all with our consciousness are the creators of the universe and the infinities and everything, because we all central suns, because we inhabit that level of frequency of that epicenter. And all other species that are seeking the same destiny, they're seeking the same evolutionary step, they're also our allies, because they want to do what we've already done. And this is what has happened moving into the future, into an infinite number of cycles, because this is it. I'm just a memory, because I'm the first one. I'm always the epicenter of it. The past and the future, I'm there, here and now. But I am already there, as you are. We all one, because we're infinite. This is our nature. So this is just the beginning. This is our origin story. This is the beginning of the Republic of Planet Earth and who we are at this level of density as a species. Because this is our nature. We're the human race. We've done this already. You just have to love with all your heart and all your mind. Trust your instincts. So exercise 4, facing fears premise. 1 to 10 scale logic. Does it scare you at all? How scary is it? Why is it so scary? Follow your heart. Signs and signals. Go for gold and diamonds. All in. Do it. Here and now. Infinite love. Infinity equals 0. You see, this exercise is fundamental because we've already done this, but this is just the density at which we find ourselves today. Humanity, I love you with all my heart, with all my mind. And this is extremely important for us to know our beautiful nature, who we are as a species, because this is exactly who we are. We're the human race. We are the human race. All of us, we're A plus billion, right? All of us, we're A plus billions. We're here to love. This is our destiny. The destiny of our species is to love ourselves, because love is the highest energy of creation. This is exactly what love is. Love is the highest energy of creation. Is the highest energy of creation. All of us have this instinct to love to infinity. That's why we love our children. That's why we love everything that matters to us, because of our nature. Is our instinct, the human heart, right? The human heart. We live to love and we love to live. We're a benevolent species. We're a love-based species, a heart-based species, a loving species. This is who we are, a heartful species. This is our nature. We are the human race. We live to love and we love to live. Lives of meaning, lives of purpose, purposeful lives, meaningful lives, happy lives. Our nature. This is precisely what our nature is. Our nature is this: infinite love, infinite energy, infinite creation. Because this is who we are. We're compass. You see, we're identity and true self. We're purpose. We're time and energy. We're compass. We are action. We're why, how. We're flow. We're true north and destination. This is who we are, you see, because those are our primary elements. This is the primary elements of us as a species. We're sundials. We open our eyes. We stare at the sun. We open our hearts. We open our minds. Open the portal and build the bridge and evolve into infinity. Our nature, who we are, the human race. This is who we are. We're an incredible species. This is who we are. We're an incredible species. We're the human race. This is our nature. This is our nature. This is who we are as a species. We are an incredible species, a remarkable species. All of us. We're all here to have a great time, to love life, and to have an incredible, incredible, incredible life. Because this is who we are. This is our nature. This is our instincts. This is our instincts. Our nature has led us to this moment. Founding the Republic of Planet Earth and being who we are. Being able to follow our dreams, chase everything that we want in our lives, because we manifest our dreams with our free will. You see, because our free will comes from our consciousness, from our awareness, because we shatter all the fantasies and illusions. You see, everything that essentially allowed us, all these gifts, because remember, in the end, what are these memories? What are these experiences? What are these events, right? What are these memories? What are these experiences? What are these events? All the fantasies, all the illusions, what are they, right? In the end, right? They're there to teach us lessons, right? They're there to teach us lessons. So we understand our nature as a species. We understand our nature as a species, that we love. So we can tap into the infinite source of love that we all are. Because this is our nature. This is who we are. We live to love and we love to live. We are infinite eternal creators. We're compass. We're sundials. This is who we are. We're an incredible, remarkable species. All of us. If you have a human heart, you're a citizen of the Republic of Planet Earth. This is our republic. This is our planet. Our ancestors manufactured this planet for us to become what we have become today. Because our heritage and legacy is infinite. It's eternal. All of us. If you're a human inhabiting Earth today, you have a heart. And this heart allows you to be one with everything, because the heart is the epicenter of creation. It's infinity itself. We are infinity itself. Our heart is infinity itself at the biological scale. This is who we are. This is our nature as a species. You see, this is our nature as a species. This is exactly who we are. This is who we are as a species. We're an incredible species. We're the most remarkable species. Love is the most powerful energy of creation. It's the highest of energies of creation. We evolve into that. So I'm going to read a few things for you, okay? So maturity equals humility. What maturity? Our maturity to understand our nature. Infinite eternal creators. The highest energy of creation is love. Exactly that. Love is energy. Love is life. Okay? Love is life. Life and love. They come from the same place, the human heart. Life is creation and creation is energy. Love is the energy of creation. This is our story, my story, your story, the human story, who we are, our origin, our genesis as a species, who we are, this remarkable, incredible species, the most amazing species. We're an incredible species. Amazing. We're just amazing, okay? Our constitution, is one. Our republic, the republic upon earth, our constitution, our infinite freedoms, our infinite freedoms, our infinite freedoms as a republic, who we are, who we are, who we are. This is exercise 4. Remember, love is infinity. This is what love is. It's this infinite virtuous cycle of compass and sundial, us coming together as one and evolving into infinity. Who we are as a species, we're just amazing. Incredible species. This is who we are. We live to love and we love to live. We're co-creators of infinite eternities. We're spherical in nature. Our electromagnetic field, the pulse of life, the pulse of creation, the human heartbeat generates the electromagnetic field that surrounds the human body and allows us to be conscious and self-aware. Our infinite singularity of the mind, consciousness and self-awareness, the heart, our love, our creation, this beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing that we all are. So we can love with all our heart and all our might, because love is the highest energy of creation. Exactly who we are, the pulse of life, the pulse of creation. Okay, this is our nature, our space structure, right? Who we are. We're incredible species. We're incredible species. We're sentient. We love, our emotions, we're feelings. This is who we are. Love equals evolution. When you love is the key that unlocks our DNA structure, our nature. When we love, we evolve, right? When we love, we evolve. We stare at the sun and we channel the energy of the sun and create the most beautiful things. You see, no fear, just love, infinite energy, infinite creation, right? Because we're the human DNA, the body, the organs, the glands. We're infinite eternal biology. This is who we are. We're evolution. We're singularities of all organs and glands, the resonance. We're energy from the sun, consciousness, self-awareness, infinite love. Love is the highest energy of creation. Love is the flow of infinity. Love is the highest energy of creation, and we are the biological expression of that. We're the biological expression of infinity. That's what we can create with our consciousness and our thoughts, infinities and universes. We are the highest energy of creation, and we are the human heart. You see, this is exactly who we are. We are just this incredible, incredible species. We're sundials, you see. Open our eyes, open our hearts, open our minds, and stare at the sun. This is what we do. We love with all our hearts, right? This is exactly who we are. This is our nature. We're this remarkable species, you see. So remember, this video is about exercise 4. So I'm going to reiterate it a little bit and go through it again. Exercise 4, facing fear's premise. 1 to 10 scale logic. Does it scare you at all? How scary is it? Why is it so scary? Follow your heart. Signs and signals. Go for gold and diamonds. All in, do it. Here and now, infinite love. Infinity equals 0. I love you all.